go ahead and click record right now. So before I begin the session, I'll just go through some housekeeping rules. And the first one, which would be to please keep your microphones muted and save your questions in the Slido link shared in the chat. Alicia, you can go ahead and share that later. So yeah, without further ado, let me introduce to you our guest speaker, Arthur Ng. Not only is he an investor and mentor at ADPList, he's also currently a lead product manager at Credit Karma Intuit. With more than a decade worth of experience, he's extremely knowledgeable in all things product. So I'm so glad we have managed to bring him on board to share more about his experience with us. Welcome, Arthur.
Hey, thanks, David. Thanks for having me here.
All right, thank you. It's really great to have you here tonight to be a part of our ADPList journey. So I just gotta kick things off with some really introductory questions, like just in a quick sentence, like who is Arthur Ng?
I can't condense 10 years worth of expertise into a single line, but that's what people pay me to do. Actually, product managers are supposed to do that. So in short, I'm actually an investor. So I've invested in ADPList, a couple of YC companies. I really love entrepreneurship. I've also helped to run the NOC program, which David is from, and I'm also from National University of Singapore myself as well. But in my full-time job, I'm actually a product manager, software engineer, QA engineer, maybe even UX designer. Some people will cringe, but I guess that's what I do. But overall, I'm a techie.
Got it. And that is, yeah. And you said you work at Credit Karma. It's like, for those that do not know about Credit Karma, it's really something within the US space. And for those that are not familiar, do you mind like sharing what is Credit Karma?
Absolutely. So Credit Karma is a very interesting company, and it really stems from the interesting concept of credit scores. For those of you who are based in the USA, you would then know that if you're a foreigner like myself, I came from Singapore, having a credit score is a very difficult thing to do, and building your credit score is even tougher than that. So a credit score kind of guarantees you, to an array of, fintech or like institutional access to purchase, for example, a mortgage, get a rental apartment, or purchase a car. There are a few things that you can do with a credit score, right? So David personally has experienced it himself when he first came into the US trying to get an apartment. He was made to pay a double deposit because he has no credit score, just because of that. So Credit Karma has about 130 million members today. We're about 1/3 of the United States population. We serve a lot of people. In the past year, we've actually been, acquired by our parent company, which is Intuit, which deals with all your taxes. So anyone who is in the US has to pay taxes will know about Intuit. And now we're combined with Credit Karma, and I work for that team.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro to Credit Karma. And of course, most recently you joined Credit Karma from you have 10 years of experience, then moving into Credit Karma. And so you said that you're a software engineer, you're a QA, you're a product manager. So you're doing everything. So what is a day in a life in a product as a product manager in Credit Karma?
So, this is a very loaded question, right? As I'm trying to see how we want to separate this. So, there are two types of PM first, right? There are types who are enterprise focused, mainly building SaaS type products. Think of them as like Salesforce. Intuit could be one of them. Those are like SaaS type companies. There are also the consumer type companies, PMs like Google, Facebook, and Airbnb would be one of those, right? So Credit Karma belongs in the second category of consumer tech, where my day-to-day kind of looks like working with UX researchers, getting data, trying to convince people in the legal and compliance team to allow me to be more creative when it comes to fintech. So imagine this, right? So my particular team, we're part of the CK Money team. Basically, we're building some sort of a bank, and we help empower our members build lead their lives better financially, build their credit scores, and also help them to get all the information within their fingertips. So if I were to propose a feature that might potentially break that system or might potentially have errors, legal and compliance are very concerned about that. So a lot of my day-to-day is involved in chatting with people in those departments. Now, if you compare that with a traditional consumer type product management, you'd probably be a very different, kind of day-to-day. And then if you compare it with the SaaS people as well, it's completely different as well, right? So I've been in a few different types of product management roles. So by far, this is the most exciting, even though it's very challenging working with compliance and legal. I don't know how these people deal with it, but it's really tough to try and talk to them.
Definitely, I agree as well. I'm also working in, you could say, RegTech and just compliance fraud in general, talking to so many companies to just try to get them to accept our product. That's already a big hassle. I definitely agree with you on that. And in this case, like you mentioned, you're just working a lot with the UX and the UI. And in general, for what are some of the trends that you have seen, like moving from like your previous role to currently, like the UI UX trends and the fintech trends that influence your priorities when you, like, let's say, talk to legal, or when you talk to like all your different kinds of stakeholders? Like, is there something you keep in mind to yourself all the time?
So I think user experience is the fundamentals here, right? As a product manager, your main goal is to build elegant products. And how do we do that in the world of compliance and legality, right? That's a very difficult and very challenging thing to do. Now, one of the things and one of the challenges I face with is that when I work with my UX researchers, it's, they kind of take an idea or a question and then they go to like 20 people, and that kind of informs their decision. Right. However, I'm serving 130 million people, right? That, the 20 people is not a full representation of the 130 million people that I serve. So how do we make sure we build the right product for people, for the entire population of your product? So one of the ways I found that is core in, the way I approach product management or building features is that we always need to back up, qualitative and quantitative data combined together, right? Don't just use one extensively. Don't just take the feedback from, an app store and then use it as your holy grail and just keep going on that. But make sure you challenge that, pressure test it, make sure that you validate whether is that the true, sentiment that you're getting from your consumers, right? So one way to do that very quickly is having surveys, getting quantitative data, getting a researcher to focus on that as well, and then compare the two data and see if there's any matches. From that point always, then set off to go and build, your feature. And most likely you're less likely to fail if you approach it that way. That will kind of help you, keep you in line, keep you in check, make sure that, you're following a framework to approach a problem.
So you would say customers is everything in whatever you do, and all your decisions and is made based on the data that you collect, and that influences everything that you do here at Credit Karma. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. So we have this philosophy, even though it's very conflicting, right? Is to move fast. Facebook has this move fast and break things. For our case, it's move fast, but don't break things, right? and the follow-up from that is that my GM would tell me, like, you get a one-time get out of a jail free card. Like, if you mess up, we can forgive you one time, right? It's like Monopoly, do not pass go, do not collect $200. But because it's so sensitive, right? You're dealing with consumers' financial data. What if I make a transaction, what if the transaction is not accurate, right? That will lead to a lot of legal issues. That will lead to a lot of people getting upset. That will lead to lawsuits coming, towards Intuit and Credit Karma, and we cannot afford to do that. So move fast, but don't break things. So there is that constant healthy tension of, like, we want to stretch the boundaries, we want to go further, we want to be creative, but we're constrained by compliance, we're constrained by legal. This is really the best summary of fintech, right? We try to be different, but almost everyone is almost the same.
It's like you're stepping on eggshells, trying to avoid them. And in this case, like, given like probably you've been through like your B2B SaaS experience as well, moving into this, was there anything really different? Do you have to relearn what you already knew? Given that, of course, right now there's this legality that goes behind all the things that you're trying to do. Like, do you have anything?
100%, right? So I was working in a B2B SaaS company. We were pushing out about 30 to 40 features every quarter. But now it takes me about 6 to 8 months before I can launch, 1 or 2 features. And, the reason to do that is because of all this compliance and all this legality that comes involved, right? So how do we consider that moving fast? This is where experimentation comes in very handy. So instead of me trying to build a roadmap or launching a feature that is like, takes 6 to 8 months to build, I quickly come up with something, I get legal to approve it, and I launch it within the month, right? And this is where incremental product development comes in very handy. So the first month I launched an A/B test, and I gather some data. I cross-check my data with my product metrics and my customer feedback, all the different channels that I have. And then in the second month or the third month, I can launch the second iteration of that. And eventually it goes to a version 4, version 5, which is essentially the same time it takes for you to build from 0 to 1 within the 8-month time span, but you have already launched it essentially, and you already collected live feedback, right? So a lot of people don't understand don't understand the concept and the power of incremental development, rapid testing, rapid experimentation. All these things may sound like very big words, but to me, it's just like build it, ship it, learn from it, fix it, and pivot, right? Or change it. So this is the one key and one core strength that I noticed that Credit Karma Money has, because like we are very good about like how we were able to push things out very quickly and test and rapid and very quickly iterate on it, and then able to get to a place of where we are today. Like it took us maybe 2 years to build a full functioning banking app. And it took like, I don't know, Viral Bank, maybe like, 3 or 4 years before they could even get there. Like they were at it longer than we were, and we did it within 2 years, and we were out in the market and we were selling it and people were using it.
That is actually really interesting. You said that you're shipping stuff really quickly. And in this case, would you say that is there any difference in terms of like the development cycle, or like, would you say, because normally people run in like development teams run in 2-week sprints, as you know, but like, is this case maybe 1 week, or is there something that's different in Credit Karma as compared to like maybe a more traditional financial institution that's doing it?
Well, in all financial institutions, you probably have to run the flagpole up by legal, right? If it depends on how quickly your legal team is working. Long story short, I'm very fortunate enough to have a partner with the legal team. Like they understand what we're trying to do. Like, the one summarizing statement from legal, actually this week, they just told us like, you guys are my favorite team. And I was like, oh, that's good to hear. But then she's like, not because you do the right things, because you guys are trying to get creative. But, we're coming along with you and we're understanding your vision, and you guys were able to communicate that very clearly to us, and we can help you achieve that vision. So this active ongoing partnership, whenever I try to start building a feature, I go straight to legal first, right? At the same time, I'm building out the specs, and it's at the same time, Eng is scoping it out for me. So everything is running in parallel. And then as the requirements change, or like if legal comes and tell me you can't do this, but you can do that, I would change the requirements on the fly, right? It puts a little stress on the team. It's not a fully fledged, baked out PRD, but it gives the sense of like agility, approval, and like we're on the right track. We're trending towards the right direction, and everything comes together very nicely. And then we launch it within a week or two. This is how you achieve that agility and make sure that, you're constantly shipping, you're constantly pushing out products, you're constantly expanding your boundaries, which is one thing that's very, very, very difficult to do in fintech.
Definitely, I agree with that so much. And in this case, your team is probably like a startup within like the whole Intuit and Credit Karma itself. So in this case, when you're building a credit builder, for example, are you focusing a lot more on like the functionality of the product or the user experience? I mean, I'm leaning towards like user experience, but in this case, many like great products have like poor UI UX due to like maybe the PMs placing more emphasis on enriching the features instead of maybe just like focusing on like what the product actually is built to do. So do you prefer like maybe if something's pretty or doesn't work as well, or maybe something that performs extremely well and not so pretty? So what is it that you prefer?
I have 2 answers for you, right? One is coming from the SaaS background. In the SaaS background, if you think about Oracle, which is super old, if you think about Workday, which is like the new Oracle slap on with a new skin, both the UI suck, right? But it achieves, they're both like multi-billion-dollar companies, like at least 10 billion and above. Like they both achieve what they need to do: HR, processing, payroll, onboarding as well. So that works beautifully, right? But is it the best thing you have seen? Is it easy to use? It's extremely complicated and it's extremely difficult to use, but people still pay for that stuff. So, that answers one part of your question, where like functionality is important, but at the same time, if you flip it around, if you go to consumer companies, right? If you think about it, Google search hasn't really changed much over 20 years at this point. It just works because it's a simple, very clear UI. There's no reason for you to change it, right? If it's not broken, don't fix it. There's that element. Now you've got TikTok who's coming up, who's a brand new, like video application software out there. I came from the world where we use Skype. I worked in Skype. It was a very completely different thing for me, right? And now seeing how beautifully it just keeps you engaged and endlessly scrolling new videos, and like next thing you know, it's like an hour gone by and you're on TikTok for an hour. That type of consumer product requires extensive UX, elegancy, right? That really it's really built for that. So, my answer to you is, well, depends on when you're building what type of products. Functionality sometimes can be P0. Sometimes, elegant UX could be P0. Really depends on that. Yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, Credit Karma in this case, it's probably more of like a banking app. You don't really check into it, so maybe the user experience doesn't matter as much, you would say?
I would say we are in between functionality. We're leaning more towards UX, and we're trying to get there. It's a little bit wordy. I personally don't think it's a well-baked UX product. Was advocate for my own product, right? But at the end of the day, this is how you strive for improvement, right? If you're not satisfied, that's how you can keep constantly try to improve the product from that perspective.
Definitely. Let's just move on to design. So in this case, while designing the experience of your product, for example, there's always a fine line and a balance that we're trying to juggle between trying to give users what they want and also a more opinionated default way of using your product. So do you face this challenge at Credit Karma, or like for any of your B2B and B2C experience back in the day?
Oh, 100%. Like, when you do a deep dive into consumer and you start to learn about their behavior, you start to understand how they use your product, right? Sometimes it can be very, enlightening, right? You realize that what you as a PM think and design with the design team and engineering team built together is completely different than what or how, the users would use it. So there's always that challenge, especially when it comes to fintech, right? So imagine, having that cycle, product design, UX, and build takes about 5 to 6 months. You launch it, you collect customer feedback, and it just completely broke. It didn't work, right? Or they were using it completely differently. Now you go back to your drawing board and you spend another 6 to 8 months trying to redesign it and rebuild it. That's like an entire year gone. And what have you done? Basically nothing much, right? So there is a strong emphasis for that. But again, goes back to my first answer, right? How quickly can you iterate? How quickly can you pivot? How quickly can you respond to your customers' feedback? How quickly can you collect those data and use it in your product decision-making process? That is the key element to success. And I can't repeat it anymore because I feel like a lot of people just tend to get stuck in between either one of these cycles and they don't move forward. So the key goal here is to launch as quickly as you can and then iterate from that.
I guess from all the years launching, were there any mistakes or oversight when you did your job? Oh.
I would be lying if I said no, right? And I'll be the best PM in the world. But by now I should be the CEO of Google. But I'll share something very personal, right? So it was my first well, I wouldn't call it the first real PM job, but the first serious PM role I had. I was like, hey, I'm the PM now. I can make all this decision. It feels really good. Now, it feels good, but it's also where you have a lot of blind spots where you make mistakes, right? If you trust your gut too much. So one of the key, features that I built early on was a search redesign project. Now, just imagine Slack today, right? Slack has a search bar. If you go on top of Slack, you type in a search term, it comes back with the results, right? Beautiful, just works. And probably returns you like 7 to 10 results, depending on what your search term is. So I was working on this product called RingCentral. It's basically has the same functionality as Slack and video element as Zoom, but it's a phone company, right? So there's a lot of telephony elements in there. Now, on this chat application, there's a search bar. So my job was to redesign that search bar. So the first thing I did wrong was to think that, hey, I feel like if users know how to use search, they should be very clear and concise with their search terms. Therefore, we don't need to allow for like 10 search results, right? So I shrink the results page to only returning the 3 results. And I thought, wow, it looks great. It looks cool. It's clean. It's neat. I launched it. Within the first hour, I'm getting tons of feedback, tons of calls on the App Store, direct customer complaints and saying search is broken. It's not returning my search result. It's only returning the top 2 results. And I know for sure, there's definitely somewhere in there. And I used to be able to find it. I can't find it anymore. See, this is the fundamental error of a PM where you think that I would like to build this thing because I think it's cool or I think it's usable for me, but then I failed to understand the user problem accurately, right? Which is users who are searching for stuff do not necessarily know what they want to search for. Therefore, providing a wide spectrum of responses and results page is incredibly useful. And then narrow it down and help them to filter it, right? That's how you should approach it. With that very quick lesson, of course I reacted. I think the greatest thing is that, it's how you respond when you deal with a problem, how you react to it, that determines your character. So I quickly responded and I quickly, put the team together and say, hey, let's think of how we can enhance this experience. And first of all, let's revert it back to 10 search results. I added a filter in there. So now if you search, it comes back with 10 results, but then you're able to accurately and quickly filter it and narrow down your search results to what you want, right? So that's like an improvement, enhancement to what you originally built, reverted back to, you built the cool feature and then reverted back to original, and then you enhance it because of customer feedback. That was my very first feature. And I would say, that really set the tone for my career. And me being a PM, being very data-driven, being very careful around assumptions, being very careful around like following and trusting my gut, even though sometimes you need to do that, it's always helpful to back it up with data.
Would you say your ego got bruised when you when you had to roll back a feature? Probably would you say so? When back then, was it?
100%, right? That cost me a ton of anxiety of like, whenever I launch a feature, I'm like, is there anyone complaining? Like, I worry a lot and I, think about it, but it's also good to keep myself on my toes. And that, kind of sharpens me to be a better PM, to really think about like, hey, when you build a feature, what are you really trying to do? How do you want to validate that with your customers? And then make sure that that's what they really want.
Yeah, I guess you talked about like data. I'm gonna sidetrack right now, like going back to when you're like before you launch a feature. And in this case, like, do you have a thought process or deciding whether a product or feature is worth keeping on the platform? Maybe it's some like specific metric, specific DAU, or like a strong niche, for example. Do you have something that you always keep to you by dearly?
I have a philosophy. And this has been especially important and has been surfacing a lot for me ever since I went into the fintech world. The philosophy I have is any data is better than no data at all. Now, today, regardless of whether you're in the design team, product team, or engineering team, if you make a decision or if you have a solution that is not backed up with data of any sorts, that's not a great solution. This is a high bar to follow, right? Not a lot of people get access to information. Not a lot of people get access to data. But a simple data could be very easily, gathered, right? So one quick example here. I had a friend or a mentee that was working in a car mechanic company, and they're building a mobile app for car mechanics. Now, one of the main requirements is that the mechanics will have to hold the phone and they will actually have to slide to check in. So I asked her the question, do you know, as a car mechanic, your hands are constantly greasy and you're either wearing a glove or, it's just very inconvenient for you to touch the phone and try to slide it, right? You'll most likely not be able to do it. And then she said, yeah, I didn't think of that. I say, you could have very easily gotten this answer by talking to 10 people within the house or in your company, or walk down the hallway and say, hey, do you prefer a slide, or do you prefer a check box, or do you prefer a button? Right. So this is, I know it's not entirely specific to that use case, but very quick collection of data can help inform you as a PM on how you should build your product or build your feature. And that will reduce the total amount of time you spend trying to figure it out and say, hey, I'm building a very cool feature by sliding in for, car technicians to check in when their hands are greasy. Now, would that actually work? A quick, experiment, a quick question, a quick collection of data will tell you like that doesn't actually work. So with that philosophy in mind, I've always asked the team this question: what are you basing your decisions on? Why are you coming up with this solution? Essentially, if they can defend it, they can back it up. Great, I'm very reasonable, right? So I'm like, okay, that sounds reasonable. Let's do it. Let's try it. If it's wrong, be ready to pivot. Don't worry about failing, right? Keep going. So, that really also helps to shape my philosophy when it comes to product design, when it comes to data collection, when it comes to like, do we know what we're doing is the right thing to build? This really helps to inform that. And this is the philosophy that drives most of my actions.
And in this case, like for data, everything, I assume you're very data oriented, but like in this case, when did you trust your gut?
I don't. I trust but verify.
Trust,
So
verify.
trust but verify. So like it's like, hey, I trust you, as a friend or something, but can I double check with you? Like, did you really do this? I know there's like trust issues, right? But the point is that you never know. And at the end of the day, great products, I would say are not built based on gut. There are a few. Obviously, Mark Zuckerberg is one of them. Apple is another one of them. Like, but these are like 1% out of the entire world of the company that makes such a successful product. Are you that 1%? For me, I don't think so, right? So I would rather rely on accurate data or actual data that comes back from the customers to inform me and teach me what I do not know. I do not know what I do not know, right? So I think that's also the way I approach it. 100%, I don't trust my gut at all. I trust, but I verify. I make sure that I have at least some data to back it up before I move forward.
Got it. Thanks for sharing. And in this case, let's just move on to like a topic on entrepreneurship for PMs. And during like one of our previous industrial sharings, founders mentioned that having product-led engineers diminishes the need for a PM role, for example, and during the initial startup phases, because usually the founders are your PMs in this case, and especially also when there's very limited capital. Do you agree with this? And how different would you having a PM impact a startup product compared to a, let's say, product-led engineer, for example? Is there a need for a PM in this case?
This is a very controversial topic. Again, these opinions are my own, right? I'm not representing any company, or I'm not representing any startup out there to say that this is the way we do it.
Disclaimer.
Now, disclaimer. Asterisks with all fintech products. Asterisks. Well, at the end of the day, it really depends on your team composition, right? If you're a startup company of 3 people, let's say CEO, CTO, designer, for example, right? Do you need a PM? Not really, right? A PM just adds in the extra layer because, like, why do you need somebody additional to come and, meddle with what to do? The more people you have in the room, the longer it takes for you to build stuff, right? So if you're a startup, you need to be scrappy, you need to execute, you need to ship, right? So only having the founder as the PM, which is what you mentioned, makes total sense. And having an engineer that is a little bit more user experience focused, it's also a blessing because not every engineer is like that. I don't know how many engineers you work with, but I've come across like at this point maybe 100+ engineers that I work with. There are only 1 or 2 that I've worked with has very good user experience sense, and they're potentially able to take my job from me and like write the specs and like take it over and like do it themselves. Obviously they give me the courtesy of checking in with me and say, hey, PM, we're doing this. Are you okay with that? Usually my answer is yes. So, but normally I'll be the one writing the specs and making sure that this is executed accordingly to what I would have liked. The flip side of this is that having a product-led engineer also means that the engineers are not focused entirely on the core job, which is building, right? So a PM's role come in to add value when we can bring, for example, data, right? Customer insights, or communicate with legal. Can you imagine an engineer talking to legal about like why we need to build this? Like, why are you wasting his precious time having this type of conversation? This is where the PM comes in, because we're technical enough to understand how we can build it, why we build it, or we can communicate with engineers on how to do it, right? And then we can also go back to legal and say, hey, here's what I'm proposing, and cut out the technical jargon, because legal will be like, I don't understand what you're trying to tell me. So we are the essential bridge between product engineering, UX and design, legal, compliance for fintech, but we are also the voice of the customer, right? You can cut out the PM, but will your product be as successful? Most likely not. Now, again, if you're in the startup, sure, do without a PM. That's my answer for you.
Yeah, makes sense. Because when you put it this way, if the engineer is taking like using so much of his time talking to all the customers, then he won't have time to work on his engineering work, right? So in this case, totally makes sense. And definitely there's a need for different type of startups here and there. And also, I think you also mentioned there's so many different kinds of startups. I mean, so many different kinds of product managers. And for example, maybe there's a growth PM role. There's also like maybe just a general product manager, and every startup is different. It really encompasses like what you need for this particular in that particular startup, and that makes the most sense for whichever. And I just wanted to move over to, let's say, being a product manager. And would you feel being a product manager really sets you up to be a founder? Because in many ways, like you said, you're communicating with everybody. You must have very good communication skills. You must be a ruthless prioritizer, you would call it, balancing all the competing priorities, creating focus. Like what do you think being a PM doesn't prepare you for? And in this case, so two questions really. Does it set you up to be a founder? And like, what doesn't a PM prepare you for?
So just a bit of context here, right? Very early on in my career, I actually started my own company. This was in 2015, before Instagram was a thing. I did influencer marketing, pretty cool. We were able to grow from like 0 to 8,000 customers within like 6 months. It's a hockey stick curve. And we raised $250,000 profitable by the end of second year. We sold it off in the third year, right? So it's a beautiful story. Now, what that story doesn't tell you is that I was a founder, right? And, as a founder, being a product manager can prepare you to be a founder, but it doesn't give you everything you need to be a founder. Obviously, some people compare, being a founder, having a startup is like having a baby, right? You basically own end-to-end delivery and basically everything that happens within the baby is yours, right? So one thing that it doesn't include as a PM is fundraising, which can take up a shit ton of your time. And that is just something that is very difficult to do. Constantly pitching, constantly selling, constantly raising money, constantly worrying about when the next paycheck is going to go out to your employees. Now, that is very stressful. As a PM, I don't have to worry about that because, I'm part of a company, right? And the company pays my bills. The founder and the CEO would deal with that. I don't have to raise money. I can focus really on my time on building the product, getting the data I need, making sure that the UX team and the engineering team are lined up and teed up before we move on from there. And, having more time again always helps, right, as a PM, because you're so limited on time. I can show you my calendar. Like on some days I have like 18 meetings. I don't know what, at the end of the day, I'm like, I need to like sit down for 30 minutes and record down what happened. So to answer your question, does being a PM help prepare you to be a founder? To a certain degree, yes. But as a founder, there are many things that you are not included as part of the learning package, right? Fundraising is one of them. Selling is another one of them. A lot of PMs don't need to sell, but technically to be a great PM, you have to be a salesperson too. And then the third thing is that, team management. As a founder, really, you have to manage a team, right? You have co-founders, you have engineers, you have designers. You have to be able to help and, manage them all together at once while all of that is happening. As a PM, you are a person with no direct team members. You can only influence. I'm sure many of you heard this term before, like you don't actually have authority, but you have to influence to get things done. So that is the fundamental and ultimate difference between a PM and a founder. Would being a PM help prepare you to become a founder to a certain degree? Yes, but you definitely need a lot more skills to be a great founder.
Well said. Well said. And in this case, you're an investor yourself and investor of ADPList especially. So what are some certain traits like you look for when you invest in like an individual or a startup? In this case,
YC branding. I'm kidding. YC is great because it helps to suss out the first layer of, founders, right? Whether do you make the cut or not. If you make the cut, it's definitely going to be a great company because Stripe came from there, Airbnb came from there. Lots of very influential companies come from YC, right? That's awesome. I think that's one way to look at it. The second way is the philosophy, right? I tend to look for founders, two things. Number one, ambition. So I can share a little bit about ADPList because I'm not sure if Felix is here. Hopefully he's not. But I met with Felix by chance. I applied to be a mentor. He rejected me. So I was like
Whoa.
really mad because I took it personally, right? So I crafted a very long email to him, almost like 3 pages, explaining the mentoring I've been doing. I'm like, I've been doing this long before you came, but when I met him in person, the energy just combusted, and I've never seen someone so ambitious before, right? The answer to is ambition. Here's this young dude, 20 something years old, built a whole network of influencer marketing through LinkedIn. He's running his own company, has $0 customer acquisition cost. He's on a hockey stick growth. I'm like, as an investor, this is like the most perfect situation that you have to invest, right? Everything just makes sense. The data makes sense. The founder makes sense. The person with the ambition makes sense. And we had 4 hours of conversation right there and then. We had 2 ice cream. Like we had 1 ice cream, and had some water, and then another ice cream. Like it was just that good. It was that kind of conversation where you knew like this is the person that you need to help. So ambition is one. The second thing is also a little bit of a personal philosophy. I used to work with this person. He is I'm not sure if people know him, but he's from East Ventures. He is one of the very prominent investors in Southeast Asia. I shall name his name, but his philosophy is that I only invest in founders who have failed before. If founders have not failed before, they do not know what they're doing. So let that sink in a little bit, right? Because only when you have experienced the pain, the failure, the tough times. I'm not saying this as a toxic negativity or toxic positivity thingy. Like entrepreneurship is really hard. Like even as a PM, every day I constantly ask myself the question, why do I want to be a PM? Why do I want to do this? Why do I want to do that? Right? It's always the why question. Now, as a founder, you're going to question yourself even more when you're forced to make a choice between firing your employees or keeping the company afloat, raising the money but giving away a big chunk of the company, or not finding product market fit, but trying to keep it going and pivot to the next idea, taking a huge risk. So somebody who hasn't done this before have no clue what's coming to them, right? But somebody who has done it before and failed will now know that, hey, this is my direction. This is data that will inform me in my future company, and I will be more successful doing that. So that's the reasoning why I invest in people like that.
Awesome. So 2 things, ambition and whether they have failed. So maybe I'll just like dive into like failing. In this case, what is considered as failing? Like, do you really have to start a startup and fail, or is it like you can fail somewhere in part of your life? And also, I guess this links to the next question I was going to ask, like whether you have failed and like what are the biggest risks you have taken in your past 11 years of your career? So that's that question.
Love to share my little screen here. Give me 1 second, okay?
Sure thing.
All right, can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Are you seeing my journey page?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So this is my journey, right? As a PM, looks pretty impressive. I started with Skype, ran my own company, went to a unicorn company after that, and then went to a public company. We were doing about $2 billion in revenue. Went to Workday, which was pretty prominent in the SaaS space, and then now Intuit and Credit Karma, right? Sounds super impressive, but have I failed before? The answer is definitely, right? Because honestly, this is what I want to be in a PM, right? This is a little bit about me. I don't like listening to other people. I think I know all the answers. It's a little bit arrogant to say that, but that also it's a learning point for me, right? To know that I'm wrong. And especially launching the first search feature, right? I think it's right, and then I got it all wrong. It just beat me down. I love experimentation. I love pushing boundaries. I like practical learning, and I hate not doing anything, right? I always like to make progress. I can't wait to get there. Better is better than good. So these are just some of my personality and my characteristics of what I am as a PM. Now, with that being said, that would have made me sound very successful, right? And you think that, oh, I landed, in my first job in college, out of college, in a great company, Skype and all that, like everything is beautiful, rosy. But it took me a lot to get there, right? So these are the jobs that I've done that nobody has ever known, or probably some people would know, but I don't really tell people about this. Like, I worked in the logistics company before. I was packing boxes. I did trading as a, stock market investor. I did plastic molding. I was working in a factory. I went to the food court and cleaned up after people after they finish eating. I worked at Adidas as a sales retail associate. I work as a bartender. I love making crafted tea infused cocktails. I worked at a fruit store because I love fruits. I serve as a waiter, and then I worked at a warehouse again. I did some printing company. I worked at the supermarket. It's called NTUC in Singapore, and I used to stock up the shelves there. And then I was a driver, chauffeur. I worked in the public service. I worked in Prime Minister's office for a little bit. I also did some lecturing with NUS as well. I did construction work. I did entertainment work as well, meaning serving events and all that. Not the entertainment you're thinking about. I was also a model for some time. Very weird career transition, but weird things. Like, these things just tells you how many things I've tried and how many things I failed at doing, or maybe just enjoy doing, or maybe not enjoy doing. And to me, all this incremental progress, right? Incremental successes that leads to where I am today as a PM. And I've had people come up and tell me, like, hey, you have a very diverse background, and I love the way you're thinking about things. And it's because I'm not a traditional academia, or like I'm not a traditional, go through the APM rotation program from Google or Facebook and come out and, become a PM. And in fact, I just heard from my boss who hired me say, he was comparing me with the other person between the two candidates. The other person had a beautiful resume. He was from like PayPal and like Google, but I was from this very scrappy and like startup looking, entrepreneurship kind of background with very growth driven mindset. He picked me, and he said, like, your ambition and your drive and your, curiosity was just like pushing forth the way you think about product management. So now, after a while, I think that I am a PM, hopefully, after 10 years. If I don't think so, then I'm in trouble. I'm an investor, I'm an advisor. I like venture capital, I love growth, and I'm a teacher, right? I do a lot of mentoring. So, sorry, long answer to your question. Have I made mistakes? Hell yeah. I've tried so many different things in my life. And, your journey from here to here is not a straight path, right? You would go around in circles, sometimes doubting yourself, questioning yourself, like, why do I want to be a PM? Why is it something that I want to do? Is this really what I want to do? Am I made for this? I don't think I'm good at this. So there's a lot of that self-doubt and self-confidence where you think about and you question yourself. But eventually, if you keep at it, you'll get to the point that you want to go to.
All right. And in this case, for all aspiring PMs, do you have any tips for them, or like maybe books or videos that you probably follow by heart in this case? Just taking some questions from the Slido.
Tips and books. There is this by, I think, Andreessen Horowitz, one of the venture partner founders of A16Z, a very prominent person who invented this book. He wrote this book, Good PM and Bad PM, I think. That's the title. I can't remember exactly, but search for somewhere along those lines. That's one book I would definitely read. Teaches me how to be a great PM and really to focus on the things that I should focus on. That's one. The second thing is that, I think philosophy, right? I always believe in all this philosophy. It's like curiosity is what makes a great PM. If you're constantly challenging and questioning, why is this built this way? Or why is it done this way? Then you will find the answer to the real questions, right? And you can fix the problem. So, having a mindset that is consistently driving towards finding the right answers or finding answers, getting data, and this is a philosophy itself, right? You as a person. I remember one of the times I was asking a friend, like, hey, why are the curbs in Singapore a different level than in California? It's because of rainfall, right? Singapore has a lot more rainfall. That's why, the curbs are a little bit shorter so that water can go down faster. But in California, everything is like, the curbs are like higher and like it's, thicker because they don't have that much rainwater coming in. So, this helps inform you as a person, as a PM, to think about all these things and build better products, right? User experience. So that is the two things that I will stand by. Reading Good PM, Bad PM would teach you how to be a great PM, and then focusing on your curiosity, asking questions, learning about why things happen.
Got it. and just being curious in general, that goes a long way, right? And yeah, I guess we've really overshot here the time. I just want to like bring up one last question from the Slido, which is from anonymous. So before we end up this session, how do you manage different countries with their teams pushing back during your rollout, especially since in this case you launched so many things, especially in B2C in this case?
So I've worked in Indonesia for a little bit, for a year or so. I couldn't speak the language, and the one lesson I learned from there was to be one together with the local team. I don't know if I'm answering the right question, but I think when you launch a product in different countries, there's a reason why there are localization copies and there are localization managers that can help you translate language into a local language, right? Because everyone uses the product differently. Everyone speaks language differently. That will inform again your decision on why things should be built a certain way. So to launch a product in multi-countries, I would say the advice is you have to understand the local culture, local context, be one with them, right? And then assimilate yourself into it and remove your product mindset, but try to absorb as much as the cultural aspects as they have and try to learn how they do things and then build the product according to that. I know it sounds very complicated, but that is the only way to ensure success, because there are many products that fail at market penetration, right? Because they don't understand how local people use their products.
Agree. I also entered at Shopee, which is a really multinational e-commerce website. I remember one instance whereby having red packets is actually you have to change the color of the red packet in another country to green packet, like for example Indonesia in this case, because that's what the how you send money over instead of red packet. So it's just really a lot of localization, you would say. Would you agree with that statement?
100%. I have like 20 friends that work in Shopee. A lot of them have shared their experience with me, like, wow, how they failed and like how, they were like not good at international markets. So I've heard a lot of stories.
All right, and I guess we have come to the end of session, but like there's someone from the question, do you have time, Arthur, to like probably get he's raising his hand. So
yeah, absolutely.
Agpi, do you want to unmute yourself if you have a question?
Okay, good evening. Good morning, sorry.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I've been following the charts, everything you said. It's actually very inspiring for me, and you made it look so seamless. So let me just go straight to my question. I'm actually new in UI US, but my background, I begin to fall in love with the user research, because I think that's actually where the big deal really is. So I want to know, how can I actually get to that point where I become an exceptional product manager? Because I know PM is a way longer. So how do I become so exceptional? Like, I don't just design, I become user centric. I don't know if you get what I'm saying, but I'm just starting basically. Thanks.
I hear you. So you want to be an exceptional PM and you're just getting your toes wet into like UX design and learning more about that function, and trying to be the best version of yourself for that team, right? So
Exactly.
I guess my answer to you is, don't try to do something that you're not great at. For example, this is very controversial, but a lot of people question me by saying, hey, does a PM have to be technical? My answer is no. Because if you trust the engineer to do their jobs, you don't have to be technical, because they are the ones who are technical. So trust them to do their jobs. What you can do as a PM is to add value to what they don't have, right? For example, engineers have less access to customers. You as a PM are closer to the customer. So you talk to the customer, distill the information, and share it back with the team as frequently as possible. So that's one way to add value, right? Now, if engineers tell you, hey, this button is very difficult to build, can I just move it to this side and like just do it this way? You'll be like, here's some data that tells you why we shouldn't be doing that. And here's how you can do it, right? This is, again, you value adding, but you don't have to be technical to do that. You can be experts in other domains. So apply the same concept to UX research, UX design. Try to give them the space, let them, do their job, trust them. provide them with data, provide them with context, provide them with business objectives, provide them with like, why are we doing this? Your job as a PM is to answer why, not to be the next best UX person. So you got to make that very clear.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing, Arthur. And a really insightful session. Really learned a lot about your journey and also everything from entrepreneurship, being a fintech PM, building the product as well. And just really wanted to hand the time over to you. Like, do you have any shout outs? Where can people find you, get connected with you, and any parting words before we end the session?
There are lots of great PMs on ADPList. We're expanding that vertical. Felix and I have talked about it, right? Design, it started with designers and great design community, super awesome, super stacked. But now we're building on the PM community. This is where a lot more people like myself will come in and share. Highly encourage people to reach out to mentors on ADPList. If you haven't signed up, just type ADPList.com, right? And figure out, sign up for an account. It's free. And you can get mentorship for free. This is like the best thing ever. I was telling Felix, like, maybe we shouldn't offer it for free. That's my investor mind talking. But, as long as we're here today, we will continue building the platform, make it free and available to everyone and, anyone, right? There's no requirement at all. Just sign up. That's one. Number two, read up a lot on how to be a great PM, right? There's a lot of things going on out there. For example, I'm actually teaching in product school. So product school is another very prominent product management school or career track or certification. It's one of the most comprehensive one I've ever seen. And they've actually done a pretty good job of distilling down like the information needed for you. It's like a 5-day course, and you can rapidly learn the frameworks, the philosophy. How do we do things? Why do we do things? And then translate that into your day-to-day and become a better PM straight from there. All right, highly encourage you to look into that. Reforge is another one that's pretty good. So those are the only two I'll recommend. I've heard people asking me about, what if, should I take a Scrum Master course? I'm like, don't do that. I had that certification for 10 years, never used it at all. Invest your time in practical PM framework skills and try to level up in the area.
All right, great. And they can find you on ADPList and get your help with anything they want through one of your sessions. That's the definite, right? So
of course.
All right. Okay. So we've come to the end of the session. Thank you so much for spending your Friday night, early morning on if it's a Saturday for you. And yeah, this session will be uploaded onto YouTube. So if you let's say have friends that are interested in building fintech product or just really want to hear Arthur speak, it will be there. And yeah, thank you so much for listening and have a great weekend ahead. All right, see you guys. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. See you.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you, David. Have a good day.